Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, getting you set for 2019 with our team previews throughout the Power 5. We present Penn State from the makeshift road studios here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Penn State football. Interesting program in that what are they, where are they going, where do they stand, what's the ceiling? We've seen tremendous improvement through the scandal. Bill O'Brien, what a remarkable job he did to maintain respectability on a number of fronts. James Franklin takes over, gets himself immediately on the hot seat with mediocre seasons, and then the rise to prominence in 2016 to the Big Ten Championship in the Rose Bowl. And then since then, a bit of a flat line to a certain extent, a flat line at a high level, especially there in 2017. But was that because of a couple special players in Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley? Penn State's 38-15 the last 4 seasons. 38-15, that's 26-10 in the Big Ten. 9-4, 6-3 last year, so they lost all the key games to the main players in the Big Ten, and of course, a bowl loss as a favorite against Kentucky in a very good football game, taking on one of the best defenses in college football. Trace McSorley obviously injured most of last season, and that really hampered his playmaking ability downfield. Penn State went 11-2 the previous season when they won the Fiesta Bowl, 7-2 in the Big Ten. They had the 2016 championship team that went 11-3 after the rough start with losses to Pitt and Michigan by 32. 8-1 in the Big Ten. Of course, the big win over Ohio State, beat Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game, lost the Rose Bowl in a classic 52-49. 7-6, 5-4, almost a different program if we go back to 2015. Basically, the trajectory has been on a rapid incline, at least for the beginning of that portion of 4 to 5 years. Right now, you'd have to say it's slightly up, but almost at a crossroads to a certain extent. So the recruiting classes have been very good. Starting in 2016 under James Franklin, number 4 in the Big Ten, number 20 in the nation. Then number 3 in the Big Ten, behind you-know-who. It's going to be Ohio State, Michigan, basically. Number 15 in the nation. Then they rose in 2018 to the second-ranked recruiting class in the Big Ten, number 6 in the nation. So those kids are going to be sophomores this year that were the 6th-ranked class in the nation. Then the freshman class right now, 13th ranked according to the 247 composite, number 2 in the Big Ten. And then this 2020 class still holding its own as a top 15 class, number 3 in the Big Ten. So they have recruited not elite Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, LSU on the national scale, or Ohio State, or even quite Michigan within the conference, but basically on the Michigan line, chasing Ohio State in recruiting. Again, it's interesting what James Franklin has done there because he saved himself in 2016. He established a program that finished in the top 10 2016, 2017, would have finished in the top 10 last year before the bowl loss to Kentucky. And so basically a top 10 program the last 3 years, but in a sense, wanting more, needing to take that next step. He outlined that after the Ohio State loss this past time. So the Nittany Lions take on the Buckeyes 2 consecutive years, lose by 1 after leading by 18 and leading by 12 late in the game in both efforts the last 2 seasons and lose 39-38 and 27-26. And that has been a microcosm of Penn State football right now. They're playing better than anyone else in the Big Ten over the past few seasons, right there with Michigan. They kind of trade wins with Michigan each year. They lost last year to the Wolverines in blowout fashion, but were really banged up at that point. But they took the big rise. Now what are they? Are they going to settle into a 9-3 kind of program, top 15 to 20 in the nation, along with a number of teams we could mention that have kind of locked into that level? Stanford comes to mind. Or are they knocking on the door? They've recruited closer to Ohio State recently, and again, with Michigan recently. It's a strong program. And again, going back to the words of James Franklin after the latest loss to Ohio State when they let him off the hook, he says, we've got a great program. Now, I think great was a bit overstated. They have an extremely good program. They've got a top 15 program. He called it a great program. We're mincing words, possibly semantics, but he pointed at Ohio State and said, elite. They're elite. We want to get to elite. Right now, we're simply great. Again, I would go the very good, high-end good route to try to get to that great status in the Big Ten. We talk about Michigan and Jim Harbaugh being at a crossroads. Why not Penn State to a certain extent? Maybe it doesn't have to happen this year, especially considering the quarterback situation, but here in the next couple of years, do they settle into that 9-3 top 15 mode that's not winning Big Ten championships, not getting to college football playoffs, and not being seriously considered in that group, or do they break through? We could see either happening. I don't see Penn State being the next Georgia to a certain extent. I just don't think the recruiting base is quite there, but I certainly see them vying for Big Ten championships. So let's start with the offense here. Prolific under Joe Moorhead. Trace McSorley, the wideout group just a few years ago, the team that went to the Rose Bowl, prolific on offense, and of course they had a special player in Saquon Barkley, and that was even being weighed down by marginal offensive lines that were hurt the worst from the scandal and the probation and the aftermath was the offensive line group and the special teams more than anything. So they were still weighed down by a lackluster offensive line, but they had such special players all over the place, even looking at the Mike Gesicki's at tight end, and Terry Godwin, and really good players all over the place. Chris Godwin. So Trace is now gone. Their offense went from prolific in 16 and 17 to pedestrian last year. Very lackluster, didn't have explosive plays. The wide receivers really let him down. So Trace McSorley moves on as an all-time great at Penn State, but he was compromised in his ability last year because of injuries, and he's just not a superstar elite talent. What a gamer and what a baller the kid is. But now we got Sean Clifford. We didn't expect to see him this year. It was supposed to be Tommy Stevens, but Stevens was hurt during the spring. Clifford took over. Stevens left. So they got a completely inexperienced quarterback in Sean Clifford, who should be an upgrade as a passer. Now, is he going to make the decisions? He's not going to be the runner that McSorley is. He's not going to be the fiery leader, at least out of the gate. So they lose the leadership, the running ability, the playmaking ability, kind of the gamesmanship, but they add an arm. Now, is that arm going to try to force the ball and throw 18 interceptions, or is that arm going to show prolific and improve this passing game that, again, was very mundane last year? KJ Hamler's a burner of flash. He's back. 46 catches, 5 touchdowns, 18 per catch. And if you saw his slant and go against the Ohio State secondary, you can see, okay, he's outrunning 4 and 5 stars for 90-some yards for a touchdown. Yeah, he's just a burner. He's a great player, or could be a great player, just a great athlete right now. Jahan Dotson, kind of in that same mode. They expect a lot more out of him, 13 catches last year. And how about Justin Shorter, 5-star? Only caught 3 passes last year. They need him desperately to be something close to what they anticipated. And so that's the wide receiver core. You got Mac Hippenhammer. He could have a breakout. They like what they saw in the spring. He's a very precision route runner, gamer kind of kid that could be a guy that they go to in the slot. Only had 6 catches and a touchdown last year. They're set at tight end as long as Pat Fryermuth is in the lineup and healthy. He only had 26 catches last year, but 8 touchdowns. Big red zone guy, great hands, Mike Gesicki type guy, but with a little bit better blocking skills. Let's get possibly the top recruits may need to be effective in their opening seasons. You got a number 20 rated wide receiver out of Florida in John Dunmore, and also TJ Jones in this current recruiting class 2019. They may need these guys to be number 3 and 4 guys in the receiving core. They keep producing running backs, number 1 type running backs. Miles Sanders leaves early, goes to the NFL. Ricky Slade steps in after Sanders had a big season, over 1,000 yards. Slade, 257 on the ground and 6 touchdowns. And they're starting to build depth at running back. Devin Ford, 5th rated running back out of high school. Noah Cain was the number 6, so they recruited and signed 2 of the top 6 running backs in the nation. Again, in Noah Cain and Devin Ford. Journey Brown's a guy that should get a look as well. The offensive line brings back 3 starters. You got left tackle Rasheed Walker, just a redshirt freshman, but they expect big things out of him eventually, and they may need them right here in 2019. All right, so during this rebuild post-probation era, Penn State's been mostly an explosive offensive team, but that changed in 2018 when the defense won most of the games, and that's going to continue most likely this year. This team was the number 1 in the nation in sacks, number 4 in tackles for loss, and the defense should be better this year. I don't know that people are talking enough about Penn State's potential to win the Big Ten because they look at quarterback and how down the offense was because of lack of wide receiver production and all those dropped passes. But man, this defense is going to be good. Defensive end, Gross-Matos, 20.5 tackles for loss. You don't see that stat very often in college football. Robert Windsor, 7.5 sacks. They got a couple inside linebackers that they just signed in the 2019 class who may need to step in and be big-time players. The number 1 inside linebacker in the nation, Brandon Smith, and also Jan Johnson, had a nice season this past year for the Nittany Lions. Micah Parsons at linebacker, he was a 5-star, 83 tackles, so he's playing near up to his ability. And then again, seniors Jan Johnson, 72 tackles last year, and Cam Brown was 63. So they're set at linebacker. It's not a dynamic group, but they're strong, they're solid, they got the production back, they're experienced, they know what they're doing in the linebacking core. And again, they've got the big playmakers at defensive line, but don't have the kind of depth where they can come at you in waves. Cornerback John Reed's a really good player. The secondary should be set. Tariq Castro-Fields had 32 tackles and 5 tackles for loss at corner. And the safety play is led by Garrett Taylor. 71 tackles from Garrett Taylor and 3 interceptions. All right. The schedule on the Western Division side is not daunting, but they don't have any give-me's in the likes of an Illinois. They take on Purdue, Iowa, and Minnesota out of the Big Ten Western Division. And, of course, there's the gauntlet in the Big Ten Eastern Division, Michigan, Michigan State. Maybe Maryland becomes a factor to a certain extent. And, of course, there's the game against Ohio State that would, you would think, prove to be, once again, the hurdle that they need to cross. They did in 2016, couldn't do it in 17 and 18. Razor close, blowing leads late against the Buckeyes. They come to Columbus the second to last weekend of the season. That's our look at Penn State football. We saw a 9-3 team in the spring was our projection out toward 2019. I'm going to, of course, as I've been talking about, we'll have my predictions before opening day. We'll include Penn State's run toward a possible Big Ten championships. Maybe I surprise everyone and pick Penn State because I don't think they're getting enough love for what could be a big season at Penn State because of this defense and because Sean Clifford can wing it downfield. Would love to know what you have to say about Penn State football right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.
The voice of college football.
That's it.